Hi, everyone. My name is Danielle Edwards. I'm Jeff Foundation's Community Engagement Manager. Thank you so much for joining our virtual workshop series. Today, in a few minutes, we'll be kicking off with Santhera, who will be speaking about their drug idebitone. I'm just going to wait a minute or two just to let some other folks join the meeting that haven't been on yet, and then we'll kick it off. All right, again, for those of you who are just joining us, my name is Danielle Edwards. I'm Jeff Foundation's Community Engagement Manager. Thank you so much for joining our virtual workshop series. Today, we're super excited to have Santhera presenting. With that being said, I'm going to just pass it over to Jessa, who will be speaking about the company and their drug idebitone.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me here today, and thank you to the Jet Foundation for accommodating this webinar considering the circumstances. My name is Jessica Pugh. I'm a Regional Medical Director with Santhera. I'm here today to talk to everyone about a topic that's on our minds, and that's respiratory health specifically for boys and men with Duchenne muscular dystrophy. Recently, Santhera issued an update to the Duchenne community regarding changes to our clinical trials during the COVID-19 pandemic, with our top priority being patient safety and well-being. Please refer to the website to view the press release. This is our forward-looking statement. At this time, Santhera has no compounds approved on the US market, but we are cautiously optimistic about our future. Anything I may say in this presentation at this time is under the topic of research. This presentation will be to talk about the role of mitochondria in DMD, which is not often considered because when we talk about the muscles, we think about dystrophin. Mitochondria also play a large role in the overall health of the muscle tissue. I'm going to discuss respiratory health and review possible treatments, including trials that we're currently enrolling as well. We've been conducting research in DMD since 2008. Our US headquarters is just outside of Boston, and we're based globally in Prattlin, Switzerland. We're also working in congenital muscular dystrophy and cystic fibrosis. We're supporting the research of vamorolone by Reveragen, which will be discussed in a separate presentation. We currently do have idebitone approved in the EU for a different disease state that leads to blindness called LHON. Trials for LHON are ongoing as well in the United States. Let's focus on respiratory function in DMD. Respiratory function is not the first thing we think about when we have a diagnosis of Duchenne, but it's really important to consider because as time goes on, muscles around the lungs continue to get weaker. And one of the biggest problems in children as they get older is more difficulty getting things out of the lungs through their cough. What we might get as a small cold could, for a child with DMD, end up being a hospitalization or something much more serious. Good measures for respiratory health. One of the first things is, as early as possible, have a consultation with the pulmonologist and start that relationship when they're young enough and can do pulmonary tests around ages 4 to 5. It's nice to have baseline pulmonary function for these children, and then per the pulmonologist's recommendation, annual pulmonary function tests. Once patients become non-ambulatory, you should be seeing a pulmonologist generally twice a year if there are no other issues. Other things that you can do as well is keep that information on file, because it's unlikely an emergency room doctor, if your child is sick, would know what respiratory function should look like for kids with DMD. You can also do very common sense things and very important things right now, considering the circumstances with the coronavirus, such as making sure your entire family gets their flu shots, having boys with DMD as well get their pneumovax, and grandparents getting their pneumovax if they've not already done so. The last thing you want is to have flu symptoms and being hospitalized in the respiratory ward of an emergency room next to a potentially symptomatic coronavirus patient. We have a section through our website and a brochure talking specifically about respiratory health. It's a really helpful reference, and I would encourage you to go to takeabreathdmd.com for more information. Let's talk a little bit about mitochondrial health and how that affects the respiratory system. Because in theory, children and men with DMD don't have problems with their lungs, there's no issue with dystrophin, but we do have muscles surrounding the lungs that we need to keep strong so we can have a strong cough reflex and support the physical architecture in the thoracic cavity that includes the heart and lungs. Mitochondria produce lots of energy called ATP, and they're what we consider the powerhouses of our bodies. They're in almost every place in your body, and when they're healthy, things go well. They can repair muscle cell damage, which happens a lot in children, particularly when they're very young, and that might explain why kids don't always get an early diagnosis of DMD. In the earlier years, muscles do get repaired, but as time goes on, that happens less and less, and when the mitochondria are unhealthy, it becomes even more of a challenge. It takes a lot of energy to repair those muscle cells, so the goal is to keep the mitochondria as healthy as possible so they can produce the energy that's needed to assist the muscles in the repair process. Now let's talk about the clinical trials of idebenone and DMD and what we've done already. We've already completed both the phase 2 and phase 3 trial. The previous phase 3 trial specifically looked at patients with DMD ages 10 and up that were not taking steroids. It was in 64 males. It just happened to be that 92% were non-ambulatory. This was a 52-week study. What's key here, if you look at the chart, is that if you were taking idebenone, you had a 66% difference favoring idebenone in the reduction of lung function versus patients taking placebo during that time who had a more significant decline in their lung function. This leads us to look at the next study, which is Cytoros. This study looks at the safety and efficacy in boys with DMD ages 10 and up with no upper age limit who are using steroids. It's the largest study ever conducted in this patient population to study respiratory function, regardless of ambulatory status and regardless of genetic mutation. It's a 78-week study. The patients that complete the study can go on to a long-term open-label extension at the end and continue receiving idebenone while we seek regulatory approval in the United States. We have less than 20 patients remaining to enroll in this study, and we do need the community's help to finish enrollment so they can get a true readout on the safety and efficacy of this drug. The study allows any mutation type in patients that have a forced vital capacity between 35 and 80%. They can be on either prednisone or deflazacort, have been on those medications for 12 months, and need to be stable on their dose for at least 6 months. There are other inclusion criteria as well, and I can refer you to clinicaltrials.gov or directly to the sites enrolling for Cytoros for additional information. Here are the sites across the United States, organized by states. You can see the easiest way to find exactly where your investigator sites are and their contact information is to go to cytorosdmd.com, look under your closest geographical area. You'll see the study coordinator and clinical investigator, as well as their contact information. Also, here we have our head of Santhera's patient advocacy, Jody Wolf, with her email on this slide. Feel free to contact her with any questions you have. Thank you to the Jet Foundation for taking the time to organize this webinar and help protect our Duchenne families during this terrible COVID-19 pandemic. We at Santhera offer you our thoughts and support as we come together to keep our families informed and put patient safety and well-being our highest priority in all ongoing studies. We express our deepest appreciation to the study participants for their dedication to Cytoros and Citaros extension during what we recognize as a particularly stressful time for families across the world. If you're a participant in the Citaros study and have questions about whether or not to attend your next study visit, please reach out directly to the team at your study site. Thank you so much for your time today.
Okay, and now thank you so much, Jessa. Sorry. Thank you so much for doing that overview of Santhera and
Sure.
Idebadone. With things, with now that being done, I'm just going to open the chat for families to be able to write some questions in that Jessa will be more than happy to answer. And then we will be following up as well after this with emails that you may, as she put Jody's Wolf on there as well, that you can then ask more questions to them after this webinar as well. So I'm just going to open it up now. Feel free to drop any questions that you may have in the chat below.
Great. Can you hear me okay, Gabby?
Yes, you sound great.
Okay, great. So I see the question about enrollment. We are still enrolling. In the United States, it's done by a site-by-site basis based on the COVID situation in those areas. We do have a few still to enroll, and we're looking at if the clinics are open and they're actively enrolling. So we have less than 20 to go. And if they're on a growth hormone that is a testosterone derivative, they cannot be enrolled into Citaros. That is one of the exclusions. But ambulation is not an exclusion. In our previous studies, we just happened to be that more of the children were non-ambulatory, but it's really an age and lung function requirement is more of the focus. So if they are still ambulatory, but they meet the criteria of FVC below 80%, then that would likely be inclusion. There are some additional criteria that would be done at the site, but those are the biggest ones. So ambulation is not a factor for us. Looking into the trial, if you just go to on the website citarosdmd.com, or you can just search clinicaltrials.gov as well. But on the website for Citaros DMD, you'll see sites across the United States based on geography, and you can click on your state or click on the closest area to you, and you'll see the contact information for who's the PI, and you'll see the study coordinator, and you can reach out to them. There are really no specific limitations regarding the genetic mutation. We take all comers for this, but if you're in another clinical trial, that would be a limitation. If your FVC is too high or too low, if you're on daytime ventilation, that is an exclusion, but nighttime ventilation is not exclusionary for the study. And so it is a little different from a lot of the other genetic studies where you have to have a specific mutation, but this is not mutation specific. Let's see. We're handling so the question is, can I screen for the study? You absolutely can, depending on where you are located and which sites, which clinics are open, and they are still doing screening. So that's my recommendation would be to look at a site-by-site basis. Some, they're based on the president's reopening of some states. Some governments are slowly reopening, which means some clinics may start to reopen as well if they have been closed, but it will be done individually at this basis. The next question about, are we still allowing compassionate use? So we're not doing compassionate use per se. We do have the expanded access program in the United States for people who don't meet Citaros criteria. However, the new enrollment for that was closed down because we had many patients and even prescribers, PIs that were trying to get around Citaros enrollment to get on active drug with the expanded access program, which I understand that families believe in the drug and they want to make sure their child gets active drug. However, it was preventing us from completing the study and filing for regulatory approval in the United States so that we could get access to Idebadone for all kids with DMD. So unfortunately, we had to stop enrollment for the expanded access program, and that will continue to be suspended until we complete enrollment for Citaros. Heart ejection fraction is not a component for us for this study. That was another question. The next question, what assistance is available to those in the trial regarding travel, lodging, meal? So there is travel assistance, it does include a daily meal allowance for families to travel, and if needed, hotel stays as well. And that's done based on different sites. There's different costs of living, so that, but for the most part, it's well taken care of. Just looking to see how our Iowa enrollment. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what that question is referring to. If it's referring to the state, I would say please go and look at the closest location to you. If the lung function is higher than 80%, that's pretty much for the younger children that are, around 8, 9 years old. Sometimes they don't meet that criteria, which is why we have the age starting at 10 and up. So the younger kids, sometimes their lung function is still pretty good. If you've had previous lung functions done, I would say go back and look at that data to see what you're taking or what your last read was. And if it was below 80%, then I would encourage you to look into a Citaro site and screen for that as well. If it's gone below 80% of FVC, it's unlikely that it will go back up, but it may stay stable for quite some time. And it just depends on the different testing parameters and how the tests are conducted. So you may blow within 1 or 2 or 3% difference, and it really means nothing about how your lung function has changed. It just means that perhaps that day your child had a better day. We all have days where we have a really good day and we might blow much higher or much lower, and it just has to do, it's effort dependent oftentimes, so younger children have more difficulty getting consistent reads. Let's see, if you're on another drug like Exondys 51, you may not be able to enroll in Citaros. The next question, will you allow siblings to be able to? Yes, so we do have a sibling enrollment with Citaros, and this is something that that we're very proud of. So even if the sibling wouldn't meet criteria on their own, there is accommodations within the Citaros study for siblings to be treated as well. Any other questions? I think that's covered. Just going to review really quickly and make sure that we have covered that. I believe so. Great. I'm going to go back down to the bottom one more time. These are really great questions that are coming across from the audience. Do you need a flu shot? Yes, you need a flu shot. You need both a flu shot annually. It has to be done within the last 11 months. And additionally, the child needs a pneumovax done at least once in their lifetime. I would say now more than ever, it is critical that everyone in the family, not just the child, get their flu shots, because as I mentioned in the presentation, I'm married to a surgeon, and so we have lots of information that's coming in, how emergency rooms are handling this pandemic across the United States, and they're separating out their ERs based on people who present with respiratory symptoms versus those who don't. The last place you or anyone in your family want to be is having flu symptoms and being sick enough to be in the hospital, because you're likely going to be sitting in the same space that active coronavirus patients would be. I would say that that's the most important thing right now, is to take care of your respiratory health in general, so that you can protect yourselves and protect your family against needing to be hospitalized for other things. But yes, flu shot is required within the last 11 months. Once you are enrolled in Citaros, however, you are not required to get additional flu shots to stay in the study, although it's highly recommended. The next question is, do you think it's safe for a child that's non-ambulatory with a low ejection fraction? So interestingly, we did in our phase 2 studies, we specifically looked at heart function in these patients, and we saw absolutely no additional risk for patients who had low ejection fraction versus other counterparts or patients that were higher ejection fraction. So I don't think that there's any additional concerns for that situation. The next question, can it benefit a 23-year-old with low ejection fraction? There's potential for idebenone to benefit at any age, and that's what we're exploring. It's another reason why we started at age 10, so that we will need some level of respiratory decline to be able to show a difference, if there is one, between the drug and placebo. However, there's no upper age limit because we do believe that there's a chance this drug could work at any age. It's not a respiratory drug. It's not particularly a drug for heart function. It's a mitochondrial drug, and mitochondria are in every space of the body. And so if we can keep the mitochondria healthy, in theory, we could have benefits across the board. It just happens to be for the study that we use respiratory measurements to evaluate how well the drug is working. The next question, if a patient in the trial gets the coronavirus, will they have to stop taking the drug? No, absolutely not. Just as if you were to get the flu or to get sick from other things, you would not need to stop taking idebenone. That would be a decision for the family or a decision for the investigator if they think that, if they're concerned that the illness might have something to do with the drug, which again, we've never seen that before, but we don't know how idebenone may interact with the coronavirus. We've not come across it yet, so that would be a first for us as well. The next question is, when do we plan on closing enrollment? Well, we need to finish our enrollment, which I think we have maybe 12 or 13 patients to go. We're definitely looking at if we could close it a bit sooner, if we had the study powered high enough, but for now we're planning to complete our enrollment based on the number of patients we'd originally stratified. So we were planning that we would get to June and be finished with enrollment, but we may now have to push that out a little ways and to accommodate for some of the clinic closures and some of the delayed screenings. So to answer your question clearly, it is unknown exactly when we will complete enrollment and close. But once we do close enrollment, it's a 1.5-year study following that. The next question, can I screen for the drug at my house? No, unfortunately, there is no in-home screening because it needs to be done by a specific monitor for your lung function that is set up specifically for Santhera's use to evaluate all kids exactly the same across the board, no matter if you live in Israel or if you live in Atlanta, Georgia. So we need to make sure that there's standardized testing. So we can't do the screening in your home. And I understand that there is concern for leaving the house and potentially being exposed to the virus. Believe me, we've been in quarantine as well. I've been sharing my home with a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. So I feel your pain as well of, the concern of staying home and not risking it. And I would not encourage anyone to take a risk that they feel is beyond their parameters of their family. So, we sort of hunkered down essentially in Atlanta, and my husband being a physician, he is out some, but his clinic has closed as well. So it really depends on where you're at in the United States. There's some areas that are more rural and they're really not affected to this degree, but places like Atlanta, we're pretty affected by the virus, and we're going up. We had 1,500 additional cases yesterday in just a 24-hour period. So you really have to weigh what's best based on where you are specifically located, what's going on with the hospital system near you, and the level of risk that the PI may as well consider. So have that discussion with the local site that's doing the Citaros enrollment. Can you talk about the Breathe DMD? So that is so we have respiratory only materials that are just disease state. We have the expanded access program, which is under as well with that you can look into. But if you go to Breathe DMD website, that's is specifically referring to the expanded access program, which I did mention. We have suspended enrollment at this time until we can complete Citaros enrollment. And then we will evaluate how best to reopen with, of course, the new norm that we're going to have with COVID-19. But yes, that is our expanded access program. And Particularly, it may also, the inclusion criteria may change after we complete enrollment for Citaros to expand out for children that or adults that are also taking steroids. But we did have to suspend enrollment because people were trying to get around Citaros criteria to get into the Breathe DMD expanded access program, unfortunately. Ladies, I believe so far that's the last question that I see.
Awesome. Those are all great questions. Thank you so much for asking. And Jessa, thank you so much for answering. If anyone has any, other questions, like I said, we'll be sure to share this information with you guys after the webinar closes. I just want to say thank you one more time to the Santhera team and Jessa especially. So thank you guys. And thank you all that you do for the Duchenne community. It means a lot. If there's no more questions, then I think we can, shut down this webinar. Thank you for all those for participating, and thank you again for joining.
Great. Thanks so much, everyone. Stay safe.
Bye.